The night sky over the Middle East has turned into something out of a war movie, but this is no simulation, no drill, and no distant history lesson. This is happening now. Silent, nearly invisible, and devastatingly precise, the United States' most secretive weapon has entered the battlefield, and everything is changing. In the darkest hours before dawn, radar systems across Iran struggled to make sense of what was coming. There were no warning sirens, no visible formations of incoming aircraft, no roaring engines cutting through the sky, and yet within minutes, explosions began ripping through some of the most heavily fortified military sites in the country. This was the arrival of the B-2 Spirit stealth bomber, an aircraft designed not just to attack, but to penetrate the impossible. Reports confirm that these bombers, flying directly from bases thousands of miles away, launched deep penetration strikes against Iranian missile facilities, command centers, and underground bunkers. The targets weren't random. They were carefully selected pieces of Iran's military backbone: ballistic missile storage, drone launch facilities, radar systems, and air defense networks. Army recognition, and what makes this even more shocking is how it happened. The B-2 doesn't just fly, it disappears. Built with advanced stealth technology, it can slip through some of the most sophisticated air defense systems in the world without being detected. That means Iran's defenses, systems designed specifically to stop air attacks, were effectively bypassed. The Times of India. Within the first 24 hours alone, over 1,000 targets were reportedly struck in a coordinated assault involving bombers, cruise missiles, and fighter jets, and this was only the beginning. Army recognition. As explosions echoed across strategic regions, military analysts began to understand the scale of what was unfolding. This wasn't just a strike, it was a systematic dismantling of Iran's ability to wage modern warfare. Missile silos were destroyed. Underground facilities, once considered untouchable, were cracked open by 2,000-pound precision-guided bombs. Air defense radars went dark, leaving entire regions exposed. The weak. And while the skies burned, something else was quietly unfolding. Ground forces were moving. Thousands of U.S. Marines, over 2,200 troops, have been deployed to the region as part of a broader military buildup. Officially, these forces are positioned for support roles, rapid response, and regional security. But in a conflict of this scale, their presence signals something deeper: preparation. The Jerusalem Post: preparation for escalation, because this is no longer just an air war. The scale of the broader campaign is staggering. According to recent reports, more than 11,000 targets have already been struck in the first month of the conflict. That includes everything from naval vessels and missile systems to command infrastructure and weapons production sites. The Wall Street Journal: entire categories of Iran's military capabilities are being systematically targeted. 13 different types of strategic assets identified and attacked. And yet, despite the overwhelming firepower, the situation remains far from one-sided. Iran has responded, missiles have been launched, drones have been deployed. U.S. bases and allied targets across the region have come under attack. Equipment losses are mounting on both sides, with billions of dollars in military assets damaged or destroyed. The Wall Street Journal. The conflict is expanding, not shrinking. What makes the B-2's role so critical is not just its destructive power, but its psychological impact. Imagine knowing that an aircraft you cannot see, cannot track, and cannot stop can strike anywhere, at any time. That's the message. The B-2 is not just a bomber, it's a statement of dominance. Capable of flying intercontinental distances, refueling mid-air, and delivering massive payloads with pinpoint accuracy, it represents the peak of modern air warfare. And in this conflict, it has become the spearhead. 1945. Every strike sends a signal, not just to Iran, but to the entire world. This is what modern warfare looks like. But behind the explosions and military strategy lies a much bigger story, one that extends far beyond the battlefield. Global oil markets are already feeling the pressure. The Strait of Hormuz, one of the most critical shipping routes in the world, has become a flashpoint. Any disruption here could send energy prices soaring worldwide. And then there's the geopolitical fallout. Allies are on edge, rivals are watching closely, diplomatic channels are working overtime to prevent further escalation. But the reality is simple. Once a conflict reaches this level of intensity, controlling it becomes incredibly difficult. Because wars like this don't just stay contained. They expand. They pull in more players. They create consequences no one can fully predict. And perhaps the most chilling part of all this is how quickly it happened. What began as rising tensions has now turned into a full-scale, multi-domain conflict involving airstrikes, naval operations, cyber warfare, and ground force deployments. And at the center of it all, flying silently above the chaos, is the B-2 stealth bomber, a machine built decades ago, now proving that in the age of advanced defense systems and modern warfare, invisibility can still be the most powerful weapon of all. But the question everyone is now asking is not what has already happened, it's what comes next. Will these strikes force a strategic collapse? The shockwaves from those initial strikes hadn't even faded when a second wave of developments began to unfold, faster, heavier, and far more complex than anyone expected. What the world had just witnessed was not a single operation, not a one-night show of force, but the opening phase of a much broader military strategy designed to reshape the balance of power across the entire region. Within hours of the first confirmed impacts, satellite imagery started revealing something deeply alarming. Entire sections of fortified military infrastructure, once buried beneath mountains or reinforced with layers of concrete and steel, were no longer intact. Analysts began pointing out that these were not ordinary bomb strikes. These were precision-guided penetrators, weapons specifically designed to burrow deep underground before detonating, effectively collapsing bunkers from within. And once again, the aircraft believed to be responsible were the B-2 stealth bombers, flying missions so long and so secretive that even their launch points remained a mystery to most observers. But what truly changed the tone of the conflict wasn't just the destruction, it was the coordination. Because while the B-2s were executing deep strike missions, a massive network of support operations was already in motion. Aerial refueling tankers stretched across continents. Surveillance drones hovered silently above critical zones. Electronic warfare units jammed communication signals, creating confusion and delay in response times. Fighter jets patrolled the outer edges of the airspace, ready to intercept any retaliation. This wasn't chaos, it was choreography. Every movement, every strike, every disruption was part of a synchronized campaign that military experts are now calling one of the most complex modern operations ever executed in such a short time frame. And then came the next phase. Naval forces began shifting positions, aircraft carrier groups moved closer to strategic waterways, destroyers equipped with advanced missile defense systems formed protective rings. Submarines, never officially acknowledged but widely assumed to be present, took silent positions beneath the waves. The message was unmistakable. Control of the sea was just as critical as control of the sky. Meanwhile, reports of ground troop deployments grew more detailed and more concerning. What initially seemed like precautionary positioning now appeared to be something more deliberate. Logistics hubs were being established, supply chains were expanding, armored vehicles were being transported into forward positions. This wasn't just preparation for defense, this was readiness for sustained engagement. And as the scale of the operation expanded, so did the response. Iran's countermeasures intensified rapidly. Ballistic missiles were launched toward regional targets, some intercepted mid-air, others reaching their intended zones. Drone swarms attempted to overwhelm defense systems. Cyber attacks targeted infrastructure, communication networks, and even financial systems beyond the immediate battlefield.